Hello, everyone. Eric Roth here, shamanic astrologer, with another episode of Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms. And before I get on with this recording, just giving you a few updates to what I'm going to be doing with this channel and future creative works here. Yeah, I'm going to be continuing with each of these episodes in Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms as a series. But I'm in the process I'm looking at March and April to kind of launch a series of videos regarding some basic astrology basics, looking at the signs and the individual planets, kind of a sum up of that, not a full course, if you will, but just free videos uploaded to give you some basic information about each of the planets from a shamanic astrology perspective, but also in combination with what I've learned outside of that, kind of worked in or alchemized within that and within shamanic astrology, and also my own experience doing readings for thousands of people out there in classes and so forth. So there's a lot that you learn based in astrology that, outside of when you originally learn, at least from what I did at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School many years ago. So this will be a new series, and I'm also, as far as educational programs, I'm looking at doing more mentoring, individual mentoring, and potentially even creating a new courses coming through, possibly even a launch of a school of sorts around this. So there's still like some really far distant things that are in the works. But in the meantime, we're going to continue with this series. And February and March, we're getting into the springtime where here in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, opposite season in the Southern, where there's a lot of activity about to kind of pop in astrologically. So I'll be making probably 3 or 4 videos just about all of this activity and alignments and conjunctions and so forth in the sky. And so let's go ahead and dive into that. I'll go ahead and share what I've got here. So yeah, episode 46 of Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms. And this is about the Aries Stellium in beginning February 2023 through really, I would say it finally ends officially. I mean, this is with considering all the conjunctions that are happening in Aries in May of 2023. So it's a roughly 2.5-month period, all told. Some days are more sort of aligned more perfectly than others. And but the window is there, and so humanity gets a chance to really explore this alignment, this sign of Aries, and what it really means. So here's a breakdown of some of the major points, not all that I'm going to be talking about, but exploring a little bit about the sign of Aries. Obviously, it's going to be throughout all the slides I'm going to share, or most of them. Venus in Aries, Chiron, Vesta, and Jupiter together, plus a little bit of information I found the last time that these planetary bodies were aligned. And I thought it was, like how close would they be aligned again in the past, and will it happen again in the future? So I take a look at that a little bit there. And then just the basic Aries stellium that's happening here for humanity. All right, so let's just briefly take a look at what Aries is all about. Aries is the archetypal sign in astrology symbolizing the decisive moment to commit. It's an actional force, a primal force. That's instinct, intuition, and all about the mission itself. That's what I mean by the moment to commit. So you commit to something and it becomes that mission. And there's little boundary between instinct and action. It simply happens generally outside rational, logical thought. So it's not so much about the mind itself, but about something even deeper and more ancient within us. For not just human beings, but for a wide variety of life on this planet. For Aries, this is essentially the essence of its nature. And it can be also described as fiery, mission-oriented, rugged, independent, and willful and ready for a challenge. So it tends to see obstacles as challenges, things to overcome, things to meet face to face. In modern times, Aries has been stereotyped as a warrior, athlete, or soldier ready for battle. But that hasn't always been the case. Many thousands of years ago, Aries had a deeper connection with the earth as a defender and honoring the great cycle of the land and sky. In fact, Aries had as far as if we want to look at the roots on a mythological level, because it has major ties in the Greco-Roman time to the god Aries, and spelled Ares, and then also the god Mars. But thousands of years prior to that, this was a god that was, it certainly showed up to do battle at times to defend things, but it had these other parts to it that showed up. It wasn't purely a soldier or just going to battle, but it worked with the land more. It worked in greater harmony with civilization, and being of service to what we call as a cosmic defender, earth defender, and of service to communities themselves. So it wasn't just to conquer or to go out there and work on a violent level. It had something deeper and richer to express itself. All right, so what are the planets and asteroids in Aries? Well, this is a list of 6 that are going to be in and out of this, with 3 that will be there for a rather long time: Chiron, Eris, and Jupiter. Those are outer planetary bodies that will be in Aries throughout this period. But Venus and Vesta and Juno will also be there at various times. So we'll get to take a look at that and what that all means. Okay, so here's the window. I list between February 19th and May 7th. Several planetary bodies come together in the sign of Aries, with the epicenter in March, and particularly the epicenter of March 10th through 12th. But there are other what we might call other epicenters, but this is one that is, I would say, the strongest of them all. And this is a rare alignment with multiple conjunctions. Only Jupiter and Venus will be visible in the early evening skies. Eris and Juno will be nearby as well. So, in fact, last night, this is the time of this recording, February 12th, 2023. So I was out and about last night, and I was looking at Venus and Jupiter, and Venus is slowly making its way to catching up with Jupiter, the 2 brightest planets that we can see in the night sky at this time. Sometimes Mars can get super bright and just slightly outshine Jupiter, but for most times it's Jupiter and Venus, and they're going to be relatively close together when we get later in the late part of February and into early March. Chiron, being the slowest moving of these planets, aside from Eris, is the primary, and in this particular primary alignment, is the channeler of this astrological intent. So whenever you have 3 planets, and this is not necessarily a perfect rule, because you might have 2 outer planets that are together, and both of them can have a very strong impact. But in this case, when we're looking at Vesta, Chiron, and Jupiter together, we're generally looking at Chiron as sort of this, the one that's sort of setting the table for how Jupiter and Vesta express themselves through this. But they all contribute in meaningful ways. So it's not to ignore that Chiron is the dominant thing here, or that Jupiter is, but all 3 provide a voice, if you will. Venus, Vesta, and Jupiter contribute to Chiron in this Aries expression. I'm going to be showing you a few charts here during this time. to kind of get you into this, as well as a night sky image. So Chiron, I'm going to be talking specifically about what that means later. But this is just to highlight the conjunction window. And in other conjunctions, we have Eris, Eris and Venus coming together at the same, like at the closest point where Venus, Vesta, and Jupiter come together. Or sorry, no, where Chiron, Jupiter, and Vesta come together. Venus and Eris are also together. So I'm going to be showing that here, more visual. But these are all like wrapped up into this space here in Aries. So it's a really kind of unusual time. Okay, so Venus in Aries, just to give you a greater look at this. This Venus moves into Aries on February 19th, the same day as the new moon, which I'll briefly talk about. I talked about in my previous video with the astrology of February 2023. And it happens less than an hour after the new moon in Pisces. So it's only 30 degrees away at that time from the sun and moon. This transit of Venus into Aries is a rarer time due to the several conjunctions that will happen in this sign. In less than a month, Venus will be in conjunction with Vesta, Chiron, Jupiter, and Eris, all within less than a month's period of time. Just a few weeks, actually, as it races through there. So it's pretty, powerful time here. Venus in Aries symbolizes the embodiment of the instinct action or primal force within the feminine. Venus is generally receptive at its core, but when it's in Aries, it definitely becomes more actional and more instinctual. And it's a defender and able to overcome obstacles thrown its way. So Venus in Aries shows up in its strength to take on a just cause and mission. So the feminine being a lot, I would say, definitely a stronger force during this time. And here's the new moon. This is something I just wanted to call this out in this video because it is happening at the same time as Venus moving into Aries, or within an hour of that. So this is happening in Pisces. So this new moon in Pisces is also setting a table too. So there may be some balance while all that Aries energy is going on. We have all this, Pisces stuff happening, particularly the sun in Pisces for about a 30-day period. But the moon will be in Pisces for about 2.5 days. So there will be some additional insights along with Neptune's position in Pisces. So this is something I shared about in the previous video, where the Sabian symbol of this is a squirrel hiding from hunters and using tactics to ensure survival, reserving, being secure, feeling small, staying out of people's way, kind of like hibernation in a way, but also stockpiling for harder times. So there's a certain conservation that's taking place here, not just only out of fear, but survival and ultimately protection, and for the long haul. It's taking that in here in the new moon, and that's happening in the Water Bearer constellation. And so I'm going to go into further details about Aries here, but I wanted to pause and share more about that, share a little bit about the new moon because of the timing of it. That happens, again, 11:06 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on February 19th. So it'll be the February 20th, an Eastern Standard Time, and of course, in Europe and Asia and Africa and Australia. All right. So February 19th, this is the chart of Venus moving into Aries. You can see this lineup already beginning to form here on this right-hand side of the chart here. You can see a lot of the planets are all clustered on mostly on the right-hand side. Even Pluto's making not far from moving into Aquarius at this time. And so we're seeing this alignment start to form. And here's the new moon that had just within the hour prior had just begun. So it's still in the new moon period. The multi-planet conjunction, the one that I look at is March 10th through the 13th, with Venus and Eris in conjunction by themselves, and then Jupiter, Chiron, and Vesta all conjunct in Aries, which I'll get to. On February 26th, Venus gets within 5 degrees of Chiron, Vesta, and Jupiter. So it's like those late days of February and those early days of March. That's really also going to be a potent period. I don't have charts for all of these things, but this is something that there'll be things that I'll post about on social media, including YouTube, that we can all tune into ourselves and to kind of keep our eyes and senses open to what's going on out there. All right, so on February 22nd, 23rd, the moon. So the moon will be racing through on February 22nd and 23rd, racing through Aries. So it'll connect with Venus first, then Vesta. On this screen here, I've got the moon and Jupiter conjunct, and then Chiron a little bit later in the day. And then the next day, it'll be with Juno and Eris. Well, as you can see, this is pretty remarkable and pretty rare, especially when you've got 2 of the outer planets, Chiron and Jupiter there. Eris has been in the sign of Aries since I believe the 1920s, and it will continue there until the 2040s, late 2040s. So it's still got some time to go before it finishes up with. It moves very slowly. So this is interesting. So this time, something that I've kind of been following off and on is, especially with the sign of Aries and Chiron in particular. And a year ago, Russia invaded Ukraine, and we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of this. So for this alignment to start in, the 22nd, 23rd is roughly about the time when Russia invaded Ukraine. And this is the alignment that's happening at the 1-year anniversary. So I find it really synchronous that this is taking place, particularly with Chiron in the picture here, because Chiron deals with our wounds, our fractures, the traumas, our vulnerabilities. And with Aries, we especially has a strong, in the last few thousand years, it's had a strong connection to war itself, and being the sort of the good soldier and being on the mission and accomplishing the mission, and being out there with sort of the band of brothers out there and with fellow warriors. The wounds and traumas that can be suffered in this time, and all the damage that can be done with many thousands of lives being lost and communities devastated. This is a chance for Aries to see more fully its wounds and allowing that to become more clear, and to show where war isn't an answer here in this. Obviously, we want to defend ourselves when we are attacked in this sense, but in the case of just outright egoic vanity, just to assuage some egoic fantasy to conquer another nation for the made up reasons and so forth. For that, this is showing the results of that, and so I'm finding this to be a really interesting point in this, and going into March as well. March is going to be a big month, I think, also for that war period. And this is also in general for all wars, that a lot of that we haven't healed from, and going on mission and purposes without consideration, without thoughtfulness, and just simply conquering, and perpetrating violence. This is Chiron is here to help us heal from this, to help us become deeply aware of it, and to realize that is not the answer here. All right, so let's take a look at February 22nd, what it looks like in the sky. So now I've got some points here that are not visible, but I'm pointing them out just so you, as an awareness. For example, Chiron right here, or I've got my mouse cursor just above Jupiter, and Vesta also here. These two are not visible to the naked eye, although with some powerful binoculars or a small telescope, you can easily see Vesta. But Chiron will be, you'll need definitely a greater magnitude medium or large telescope to be able to spot that. But look at Jupiter and the crescent moon here, and we have Venus catching up. So you're going to see it here all in the fish constellation. It's past this equinox point, the March equinox point, all racing through the two fish between Pegasus and Cetus, the great whale. And below that is the water bearer. Again, this is the evening sky here. I want to talk a little bit more about Chiron again, coming back to this, sharing about it. In shamanic astrology, there are 6 major points of what Chiron shows as far as our wounds go. And this comes from Daniel Giamario's Shamanic Astrology Handbook. First is, again, this is not in order of priority. These are just the 6. Betrayal is the first bullet point I've got there. The second, abandonment and isolation. The third, lack of self-love. And that one is, I would say, one of the of all of these, probably the greatest, or one of the 2 or 3 greatest out there in the world today. And when we lack that, we try to grab it from somewhere else and try to seize it and try to fill it in with either material things, with unhealthy relationships, and sort of an egoic expansion, trying to find and capture security for themselves and build great walls around themselves. So certainly, as if that's going to protect from everything else around it, but just essentially sucking the life out of the person. Guilt and shame is the other one. Victimization is the 5th one here, and then perfection, the inner critic. So all of those are really powerful. So in addition to, we all experience at least one core fracture point when we're born, that sort of that separation from unity. This is again from the Shamanic Astrology Handbook, or from our true divine nature. And so as we separate from the womb there, we open up to become an individual, even as we're nurtured by the mother. And this can feel this is what Daniel describes as something piercing you in the heart. So it's pretty profound and traumatic moment for each human being. And in some cases, there's many cases where this can actually profoundly carry on throughout our lives. And we work with this, we individuate, we understand what our soul is trying to open up into and learn in this lifetime. And so Chiron becomes our medicine, a way of healing ourselves, of working with our wounds, not eradicating them, but working with them so that they become something of an elixir that we alchemize into a strength in our lives, a gift, if you will. Here is a list of the Aries conjunctions, some of the major ones. This is not everything here, but in February 22nd, 23rd, we have the moon in Aries. On the 26th, we have Venus, Chiron, Vesta, and Jupiter, all within 5 degrees. And then on March 2nd, we have Venus, Chiron, Vesta, Jupiter within 4 degrees. And then between March 2nd and 11th is when Venus starts to conjunct Vesta and Jupiter and Chiron. And then March 11th, we have the Venus-Eris conjunction. And actually, this is the day after that conjunction here. We can see Eris and Venus here at 24 between 24 and 25 degrees. But this is the closest point between Chiron, Vesta, and Jupiter on March 12th. They're within 4 minutes, or 1/15 of a degree from each other. Now, there's something that also happened in the 1970s, which I'm going to talk about March 21 and 22nd, Moon joins the alignment again. So a month later, the moon goes through the signs, all the signs, once per month, sometimes twice, but all signs go through once per month. And then on April 23rd, we have a Jupiter Eris conjunction at 2440. So I'm looking to do a follow-up video with this, and maybe one in March and then another one in April around this, just maybe special edition videos for this. I'm certainly going to be writing about it. All right. Look at here's March 12th evening sky, and you can see this is the tight conjunction. This is the three that are here. We have Jupiter, we have Vesta and Chiron, all right in this zone here, around 14.5 degrees of Aries. We have Venus conjunct Eris. Now, Venus is right on the ecliptic, but Eris is fairly off the ecliptic here. And so it's, it's not Eris is not visible to naked eye. You really need basically the Hubble telescope to be able to see it, or something really powerful, a ground telescope on Earth to see it, because it's so far away. It's actually near its farthest point in its orbit right now, and it takes 560 years to see it. But I've got it listed as a position there. So when you're looking at Venus and Jupiter as lights in the sky there, you just looking at this graphic here, you just kind of eyeball or estimate, ballpark it where Chiron, Vesta, and Juno here, the asteroid Juno, which is also playing a role here in Aries along with Eris. And if you really have a really good night sky, away from light pollution, we have the Pegasus constellation, and we also have Andromeda. Not only the constellation, but the galaxy. I've seen this with the naked eye under dark sky conditions a few times, and it just looks like a smudge of a cloud, but it's actually a galaxy. In fact, at times prior to when telescopes started getting better in the late 19th century and early 20th century, they were looking at these as if they were like nebulae. And then later, when they became more powerful, we could see that these were made up of individual stars, and that there were millions of them. So we realized, like, okay, that's another galaxy, and then we live in one. So it kind of blew our minds. Another window into the deep and cosmic, wavelength out there in the distance. Now, this alignment, a semblance of this alignment, a similar alignment happened in 1975 and 76. It's not quite as profound, but there were a lot of different characteristics of this, and that I could do almost a whole video on all the different alignments that took place in 1975 and 76 with Aries. We had a Juno Eris, Pallas Athena Eris conjunction here, and then we had Vesta, Chiron, and Jupiter in Aries as well. This is on as of March 10th, 76. So this was like late in that alignment. So it was between March 75 and 76 when a similar pattern took place with Chiron, Jupiter, and Vesta. Eris was there too. This is the closest comparison to March 2023 with Vesta, Jupiter, and Chiron in Aries. I got a misprint there. The three planetary bodies came within 1 degree of each other. Actually, I think it's a little bit cut off there. There we go. There. That might be easier to see. Yeah. So Eris is about 15 degrees away. On March 22nd, they're within 1/15 of a degree. So this is much, much closer, but still profoundly close. The asteroid Pallas Athena was less than 4 degrees away from Eris, which is also featured in part of the stellium of March 2023. Back in 75, Mars joined Chiron, Jupiter, and then Eris and Aries. Then Mars left Aries on July 1st. So between late May and 75 and late June of 75, Mars was there and left on July 1st. And then Vesta entered Aries on July 6th and actually stayed in Aries all the way through a good portion of this, I think the first third of 1976 there. So the major difference of this pattern is that Venus was not prominently featured. However, Venus was in Aries in February, March 75, just as, I mean, it was almost within a few days of Jupiter entering Aries that Venus entered Taurus. So again, there was another powerful alignment. And the reason part of this is like this is because Jupiter has, and Venus is part of this too, they match up together like 47 to 48 years. And then Chiron has typically about a 50-ish year cycle. And so you can get sometimes with the retrograde loops, Chiron showing up a bit earlier or a bit later. So in this case, it actually showed up in a time where it was matching up relatively well in this. And so there's something powerful here. During this time, I just want to highlight this in 75 that was going on. It was in the U.S., the U.S. was involved at the end of the Vietnam War. In fact, on April 30th, 1975, is when that finalized, when Saigon was captured and there was emergency evacuations taking place all over South Vietnam. And a lot of drama was taking place. And there was also communism was spreading in Cambodia. There was wars taking place, and Cambodia folded into more of a communist type of energy, politically speaking. It wasn't like a permanent state of affairs, but that was sort of the energy that was going on around this time. And war was we were seeing the wounds of war and America's, arm reaching in, and the traumas it caused, along with the communist revolution that was taking place in Vietnam. We won't have to talk fully about that war at this time, but let's just say that Aries was prominently featured here, and it's particularly with Chiron in Aries during this time, during the several years of the Vietnam War. In fact, I would say, more than half of it was taking place while Chiron was in Aries. So again, there were other things happening around the world at this time. I don't want to just only say that this was only about Vietnam, but we could see something going on here. I definitely something going on with the Russia invasion of Ukraine, and there's some connection here to the Vietnam War, especially the last several years of that war. So that's something that we can look to in ourselves as we kind of contemplate all of this, and the wounds, the damage, the traumas, the war traumas that take place, and all the people that had to suffer through that. Not just the soldiers, but all the people that lived in those areas, and how their homes were destroyed, or they were completely displaced, or a lot of loved ones died. So we can see this in this, and we can see the wounds coming forth. And this is, again, I look at this as an opportunity for great healing, for coming together and connecting, and not just continuing to react and oh, they shot this person, so I need to go and exact revenge, and then it just builds up from there, ad nauseum, all over and over and over, go, et cetera, et cetera. So just another piece there. Now I want to share about this, and this is something I mentioned in the last video, is that Jupiter will be eclipsed. It won't be visible, but the moon and Jupiter will be really close. So when I shared with you here, you can see the moon really, really close. The occultation will not be visible, but I think in like it happens in the daytime, if I remember right. But even when it's not, we can see a really, really close, like this happened when I was back in January. I didn't get to see the occultation of Mars, but the moon and Mars were so very close together that even though it wasn't occulted, it was a really powerful moment. It's rare. We don't get to see it that often, particularly with weather conditions. If it's too cloudy, or if it's happening in the daytime, we won't be able to see it a lot of times. But this time we got to see that Mars one. So there'll be other times later that will be visible occultations happening. All right, so this is kind of a dive into the alignments, and there'll be more videos to come. And this is my practice in Spiral Nexus. And you can and I want to thank you for watching this, and subscribe and like this. If you do, please share this with somebody who you think might like some astrological insights out there. And as an astrologer, I do personal readings, classes, events, astrocartography, and there's my various websites that you can connect with me at, and the email address. So I wish all of you a very happy February, and to really tune into the sky and these planets, for they are our spirit guides and our wisdom carriers, along with Mother Earth and her creatures here on this planet. So I wish all of you the best, and take care.